Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool review for you from, of course, a channel favorite, the brand Seiko. A little bit about Seiko is they were founded back in 1881. They are Japanese in origin and now have factories throughout Asia where they manufacture all of their various parts. One of the really nice things about Seiko is pretty much everything is done in-house. Any part of a watch that they produce, they can produce. They don't really outsource anything. So that's definitely real interesting. And another great tidbit about Seiko is that they really cover all market segments, really from entry level to high end, which no other brand really does that, unless you can, would count maybe the Swatch Group, but they own, various sub-brands that they market kind of in each bracket there. The cool thing about Seiko is they actually, kind of every brand that's under them, apart from a few, are pretty much named Seiko. So you really know them as Seiko watches, although there are a couple of sub-brands as well that can go a little bit more into the high end and even some at the more entry level, but for this particular review, we're looking at an awesome new release, something that I feel like the market has been waiting for quite some time. A little bit about the type of watch this is. It's a bit of a crossover watch. So this is considered a Fieldmaster watch, so it is considered a field watch. But also, as you can see, it does have that classic tuna shroud, which is just really, textbook Seiko there. So this is kind of a crossover watch, so it's kind of a dive watch, kind of a field watch, but essentially some key common characteristics and design languages. You're going to want something that is, of course, tough and legible and just comfortable, and really the legibility and the toughness are going to be the big things here. One thing to note, I do have this particular watch mounted on an aftermarket bracelet. It is actually this. Comes with the silicone strap, as you can see on the flanks there, but what's actually mounted is an option from Deep Blue. It's a polyurethane rubber bracelet. So the nice thing is, because this particular model has a resin case, it was nice to really, put a bracelet option on there that really made sense. I think it would be a little odd to put a metal bracelet on a resin case. So to be able to have a rubber bracelet that's, basically made out of links, it really is a nice, fun, comfortable option. But I did still want to show you guys the factory options as well, just so you can kind of get a look and see that there is a bit of a difference here from this strap versus some of the straps you might see that are a little bit similar that come from some of Seiko's a little bit more high-end offerings. So this particular model is the SBEP001 or the Digi-Tuna. Now this is a Prospex watch that is made in conjunction with the brand LOWERCASE, and this is part of the Fieldmaster line. Now you can actually see these going right now for a bunch of different prices online, and they're selling out super fast. But for me, the best place I found was Seiya Japan, and they have them actually going for under $300, which is great. So these are going for $294, which is absolutely outstanding. So let's go ahead and get this piece in hand. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a closer look. So it's going to be a little bit tough with the studio lights here because, of course, normally when these faces are lit for the watches I review, they don't have a digital screen. And, of course, this isn't really backlit. It's actually a negative display. So it's going to be actually a little bit harder to read without a little bit of light on there, because if I do it face on here, as you can see, it's actually going to really not register much of a contrast there. So I'm going to try to keep it kind of at an angle there so you can get a nice look at the screen. So although the specs did fly across earlier there, just to reiterate, this is a 49.5mm case, but it does wear much smaller because, of course, of that near lugless design. It's 49.5 in width, but as far as lug to lug goes, is about 49.9, so almost 50. But because of those nice swooping lugs. You know, it is basically a lugless design. And then on the thickness side, this is a 14.1 millimeter thickness. It does have that beautiful resin case there, which makes this infinitely light, which was really nice to pair with this aftermarket bracelet, which also is, you know, it's not made out of metal, although it does have full screw links here. It's actually made out of polyurethane rubber, so really nice and kind of suits the lightness of the watch for sure, and I think really suits the tone. And I do like the link style, you know, reminds me of the Monster, so it does have also some Seiko design language involved as well, which is pretty keen. And then very quickly, let's also take a brief look at the strap here. As you can see, this actually isn't the normal Prospex strap that you would receive with, let's say, a nice turtle reissue. But it does have the same silicone makeup there. Just the underside isn't going to have that great texturing or anything like that. And then also the buckle portion isn't going to be quite as nice. And also here, as you can see, it's going to use more of a standard spring bar versus the fatter Seiko spring bars. So those are just a couple of things to note. You know, this strap is perfectly adequate. I am not a huge fan of silicone straps just because of the dust side of it, and it's one of those things where, of course, in video reviews and pictures, the dust is definitely a lot more evident than you'd probably really care for on a day-to-day basis. You wouldn't really notice. But for me, this is definitely nice, super comfortable. But I did want to kind of showcase the watch on this bracelet option because I think it's actually really cool. So let's go ahead and move these off the frame there and really focus on the Digi-Tuna and kind of my thoughts on it. So a little bit more as far as the details go, one of the things I know that a lot of people kind of wondered about is why does it have a rotating bezel with a digital display? But one thing you'll actually see here is you can see the little hash marks that go all the way around. That's actually a minute counter. So in the same fashion that you would be able to, you know, time something based on the minute hand, because there's actually a minute counter there that ticks all the way around. It's 42, so there's, you know, right there is 42 past that, bam. So you would still be able to use this as a regular, as far as you know, elapsed time for diving and whatnot. It still would have the same feature, although that I will mention that this is not a unidirectional bezel. This is actually bidirectional, so it's just friction and you can kind of slide it back and forth. There's no sound or anything, no clicks. It's a very smooth operation. So there's not too much to review from that side of it. Of course, it doesn't feel that you can't worry about backplay when there's really infinite play because it's friction based movement there on the bezel action. So one of the really nice things though is how light this watch is. I mean, it's something that I really can't describe on the video. It's kind of hard for me to explain. It's one of those things you just kind of have to feel it on the wrist. And for a watch that, of course, that is much larger than what I would normally wear, you know, I'd say anywhere in between 42 and 38, you know, depending, is going to be the sizes that I'm normally more comfortable with. This is well above that, but because of the tuna shape, it does wear extremely well. And then because of the construction, it actually is extremely light, which is really, really nice. So a little bit about the movement and everything from that standpoint. This is the Seiko Solar S802 movement, which actually is pretty nice. You know, I'm not huge into quartz movements, but this one is pretty solid because it does give you 5 months of you know, power reserve on a full charge, or up to 20 months in power save mode, where basically the screen is going to kind of black itself out and then come to life only when you're have it on wrist. And as far as accuracy goes, it's going to be plus or minus about 20 seconds a month, which is really great. You know, of course, the average you know, Seiko movement on the automatic side, I mean, you can get plus or minus 20 to 30 seconds a day. So really nice to have a watch that you can kind of grab and go. You don't have to worry about setting it. I know that that's something that I always do with all of my automatic watches, which is the majority of my collection. Is, you know, and when I'm in a hurry, I don't really have a watch that I can grab, and this really fulfills that need for me, which is really, really nice. So, of course, this really doesn't have much in the way of, you know, explaining the dial or anything like that, because it is that reverse LCD screen. But one of the things you'll see is the outer ring there that's at another level. That's actually where it takes the solar charge on the outer side, and then the lower underside is where the screen is at. So that's really nice. It does add a little bit of depth and does, again, help to kind of visually shrink the watch down. Also, as you can see, it is 20 bar water resistant, so this is something you can also you know, take swimming and whatnot as well. So it's not just, you know, be strictly for land use, although it is part of that kind of Fieldmaster line. Now, you know, let's go ahead and get this on wrist. All right, now on wrist, as you can see on my 7¼ inch wide wrist, it definitely wears really nicely, and this thing is so light. This is probably the largest watch I'm ever going to say this, but it really does disappear on your wrist, especially when you're used to wearing automatic watches, especially if you're used to wearing automatic sports watches. So you're already kind of used to some heft, and I know your brain will kind of equate heft to quality, so it's definitely something to kind of wrap your head around. If you're somebody who wears G-Shocks a lot, I mean, I used to wear G-Shocks a lot when I was in active duty. I was serving in the Marine Corps. So it's something that I was, you know, used to kind of buying watches that would disappear on the wrist. And if I was still active duty today, this definitely would be a great option for me with the solar power, and then of course everything, you know, really being impact resistant. And it's not a super expensive watch, and it's something that I really wouldn't ever have to worry about, which is really nice. So as you can see, if I bring it up a little bit closer to the camera, you'll see that, you know, it's going to appear a little bit bigger on the wrist, but, you know, get it a little further out, get a little bit more of my arm and my hand in the picture. You can see, to scale wise, I think it is really right at home, of course, on the wrist. And on the factory rubber factory rubber strap, it actually wears, you know, pretty much just the same than it does on this aftermarket deep blue bracelet, which I'm really, really digging the vibe on that one. You know, and even kind of the shortcomings of this particular bracelet is that, you know, it does have a stamped clasp, which is funny, you know, it's because most of Seiko's clasps are stamped, so it's really not too much of a huge issue with it. So you give it a little closer look at the actual metal parts of the watch there, and one of the nice things is because of the steel clasp, you know, it actually kind of does suit the case back with the metal on metal there. And then as you can see, it's nice to have the contrast buttons there with some nice machining, and then on this side, you know, a little bit of that kind of reverse waffle pattern for some grip there. Really nice when you're actuating the different feature sets and whatnot. So really cool piece. Now this watch does have Lume. It has a really interesting way that it engages the Lume. So it actually needs to be on the wrist to do. So let me get it back on the wrist there. And we'll get this set up for some darkness here. So what I'll do is I'll demonstrate with the lights on there pretty much the way it's activated. So you just give it a quick tap, and although you can't tell right now, that actually does light up the screen. It's just not doing it right now because of course it's under the studio lights. So let's go ahead, and as you can see, there's the pip. We're gonna give it a little tap, and it does light right up. It's not super long, it's like 2 seconds basically. But as you can see, it definitely does the job. And you can actually set the watch to be more or less sensitive. Sorry for all the bouncing around. Unfortunately, this is just kind of the nature of the beast for the Lume on this, which is a really interesting. I think I would have preferred kind of a dedicated button for this, but you know, it's doing the job, and of course it's a little tough on camera because it's trying to focus and everything, and it's not wanting to. So sorry about that. That's probably you know, it's definitely restrictive for video, but I think in use it definitely works completely fine. Let me actually get this off wrist and close with some final thoughts. All right, so the Digi-Tuna, you know, on wrist, it's super light and comfortable, but at the same time, it's still extremely bold and very legible. I know that's, I don't know if that's going to be picked up too much here from the video, just because kind of the nature of the beast for studio lights and this LCD screen, but trust me, in person, it's definitely completely fine as far as legibility goes. I will say in kind of low light, of course, that's where it's going to have its drawbacks. It does light up for you to be able to see it, but you know, it's not like, you know, Seiko's Lume Bright, which is super bright. You know, it's gonna blast for you. It's really just kind of a quick little burst of light just to give you a quick idea of what the time is, and of course you can tap away at the screen. The nice thing is, since it is solar powered, it's pretty much, you're not gonna run out the battery. All you gotta do is go outside and this thing will recharge really quite easily there. So a little bit about a couple of the other model variants. Of course, this is the black and silver model. It does have, you know, the silver pushers and accents there. There's also a black on black limited edition. There's also one that has a Pepsi bezel, and then there's one with a black, that's also black, of course, again, but with gold accents and pushers and whatnot. And then there's actually one that is kind of a black, silver, and green, you know, more kind of field-oriented limited edition as well, that really capitalizes kind of on the field aspect. For me, I really liked this really tactical kind of look and feel that this one has. You know, this is something where if I was going to go to the range or, you know, camping, something like that, this is just really perfect for that type of, you know, adventure. So I'm really a huge fan of this. I've always been a fan of the Tuna. It's one of those things, though, it was a little bit tough for me to kind of spend that much money for a watch that is quartz, of course, and then, you know, even the automatic Tunas are, you know, even more expensive. So it's one of those things, especially for something that is a tool watch, it was always kind of tough for me to justify. I think the nice thing about this, and of course some of the other lowercase quartz Tunas, is that they're very affordable. So it's kind of a nice crossroads, is you're gonna be able to pick up something that is quite affordable, but at the same time does carry a nice heritage. I mean, this is, you know, an original design and look from a brand that's been around for such a long time. So it's really cool, and it is a nice alternative to the G-Shock. I still love my G-Shocks. You know, they're only coming out with more and more cool and interesting ways to be kind of interfaced and used. They have Bluetooth and you know, but at the same time, G-Shocks are just all growing. They're just getting bigger and bigger. A lot of the retro ones are still pretty nice, but unfortunately, because of kind of the newer models, some of the size issues, for me, they're just not great, just because, you know, kind of my style of dress is going to be a little bit less casual. So, you know, wearing a big plastic watch isn't always going to fit every kind of a situation that I would normally be in. But I will say, kind of course, like I mentioned, comparable models would be something like a resin G-Shock. You know, you probably wouldn't want to compare this to some of the steel G-Shocks that are going to be way more expensive and also a lot more feature rich. This is something that's, you know, of course this does have some nice features, but you know, they're all pretty standard. There's nothing that's crazy. There's no GPS or Bluetooth or anything like that. And this is all pretty much what's to be expected as far as features on, you know, a digital watch. So it's gonna have all of those features. Really, the bottom line on this piece is that, you know, it's pretty much the Digi-Tuna that we've all been waiting for, and I think that this is a market that I feel like it's always existed, and it's always been kind of prime for capitalization, and I'm really surprised that it took this long. I mean, there was the kind of Annie Digi Arnold watch, you know, the old tunas that would have the readout on the screen, as well as the arms and, you know, the hour and minute hand and everything. So those are really cool pieces. I feel like this is kind of a more modern look at. I mean, if Dutch was you know, chasing down the Predator today, I think this could be something that he'd be comfortable wearing as well. So go ahead and let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you like the video, please hit like, and if you haven't already, do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.